She was locked in a barn like an animal, her cries swallowed by the storm. No one was meant to hear her, not until a wandering cowboy, haunted by his own grief, reined in his horse and froze. What he did next would defy a whole town, and change both their lives forever. The prairie night was usually quiet, broken only by the rustle of wind through mesquite branches or the lonely call of a coyote. But tonight, another sound pierced the silence, a muffled sob drifting out from a weather-worn barn on the edge of a forgotten ranch. The cries were low, ragged, almost swallowed by the creak of the timber walls, but to him, riding under the moon's pale glow, they sounded louder than a gunshot. He pulled on the reins, his stallion snorting clouds of steam into the cold. The cowboy was no stranger to pain. He'd buried a wife under the cottonwoods 2 winters ago, and since then, the road had been his only companion. Dust clung to his duster coat, and grief clung to his eyes. He had sworn never to open his heart again. Yet the sobbing, fragile, broken human, cut straight through the armor he carried heavier than his revolver. He dismounted slowly, boots crunching against the frost-bitten earth, and approached the barn. A lantern flickered inside, throwing uneven shadows across the slats. He pressed his ear to the wood. The sound was unmistakable now, a girl's voice, trembling with despair. He found the door chained, locked from the outside as though holding something dangerous. But what he heard was no outlaw, no beast. It was the cry of someone abandoned. He hesitated, hand hovering above the chain. Breaking into another man's barn was no small matter. Yet leaving someone behind those walls, was that worse? His fingers gripped the cold iron. The cries quieted, as if the girl sensed someone listening. Silence stretched, thick and brittle. He whispered, low and steady, "You're not alone." The barn answered with a sudden thud, someone stumbling within. His heart hammered. Was she reaching for hope, or bracing for another punishment? The wind howled through the valley, carrying with it the scent of rain and the weight of choice. He knew one thing for certain. The West was merciless, but sometimes mercy came only from strangers. And in that moment, he wondered, was he about to save a life? Or ruin his own? The storm broke before dawn. Thunder rolled across the valley like the voice of an angry god, and lightning clawed at the horizon, painting the ranch in flashes of white fire. The cowboy, Jonah Carver, led his horse into the barn, having finally pried open the chain with the butt of his revolver. What he found inside silenced even the storm for a heartbeat. She was huddled in the straw, arms wrapped around her knees, a scrap of burlap tossed over her shoulders, as though that could shield her from the night's chill. Mud streaked her pale face, but her eyes, large, frightened, and unbroken, locked on him the instant the door swung wide. She was no outlaw, no thief. Just a girl punished cruelly by hands that should have protected her. Jonah knelt, careful not to startle her. "Name?" His voice was low, gravel ground down by miles of silence. She hesitated, then whispered, "Clara Mae." The name carried sorrow, like she'd said it to no one in days. He set a blanket, his own, around her shoulders. She flinched at first, then stilled beneath its warmth. He noticed the thin scars on her wrists, marks of rope or labor, the kind that told stories no one ever spoke aloud. He didn't ask. Not yet. Outside, rain hammered the roof, dripping through loose boards. The barn smelled of damp hay and loneliness. Jonah struck a match and lit a lantern, the glow softening the sharp planes of his weathered face. He was a man shaped by loss, and Clara Mae seemed carved from the same stone. Fragile at the edges, strong where she shouldn't have to be. He set about calming the horse, scattering hay, keeping his movement steady. Clara watched him silently, her fingers clutching the blanket tighter. He didn't press her with questions. Instead, he let the silence hold, as if words might scare her away. And yet each time his gaze met hers, he felt it, the faint spark of 2 storms recognizing one another. He had not sought her, and she had not called for him. But fate in the Wild West rarely asked permission. The thunder cracked again, shaking the rafters. For a moment, Jonah thought he saw her lips move in prayer. Or was it a plea? What chains of the past bound this girl to such punishment? And why did he already feel they bound him too? Morning brought a brittle calm. The storm had passed, but the land bore its scars. Mud pooled in wagon ruts, branches scattered across the ranch yard, the air heavy with the smell of wet earth. Inside Jonah's cabin, Clara Mae moved quietly, almost ghost-like, her steps soft against the worn wooden floor. He'd brought her there before dawn, unwilling to leave her in that locked barn, and now the small room seemed fuller for her presence, though she tried to make herself invisible. She gathered firewood, stacked it neatly, then crouched at the hearth to coax flames to life. Her hands trembled, but she focused with stubborn patience until sparks caught. Jonah watched from his chair, pretending to read an old ledger he hadn't touched in months. Truth was, he was studying her every move, the way she bit her lip when the fire finally caught, the way relief flickered across her face before she quickly buried it again. At night, when sleep eluded him, he lay still and listened. Sometimes he heard her whispering, fragments of memory, confessions to no one. Once he caught the words, "I'm not useless. I'm not." He wanted to rise, to tell her she was more than whoever had convinced her otherwise. But instead, he stayed silent, afraid too much kindness might shatter the fragile trust between them. Days stretched into weeks. Jonah's horse grew used to Clara's touch, no longer skittish when she approached with oats. The cabin smelled of fresh bread she dared to bake, though she always left the first slice by the window, as if offering thanks to something unseen. Slowly, her laughter, small and uncertain, slipped into the house when she tripped over the broom or muttered about stubborn pots. And though Jonah kept his face stern, his heart stirred, remembering what it was to feel warmth in a home. One evening, she brought him a cup of coffee, her fingers brushing his calloused hand as she set it down. The touch lingered, brief, accidental, but enough to jolt him. Their eyes met. Her cheeks flushed and she turned away quickly, staring into the fire. Jonah's chest tightened. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It throbbed with unspoken words, with questions neither dared ask, but silence never holds forever. And when it breaks, it demands a price. Out here in the Wild West, every act of kindness carried a cost, and every secret could spark a fire. If this story has held you so far, don't ride off just yet. Subscribe now, because the next turn may be the one that breaks a heart. Or saves it. It broke on a night when the valley brimmed with unease. The town's whispers had slithered their way up the trail, rumors of a girl hiding in Jonah Carver's cabin. Some called her a runaway, others a thief, a few muttered worse. By the time the ranch lanterns flickered to life, the tension in the air was thick enough to choke. Clara Mae had tried to leave once that afternoon. Jonah had caught her near the corral, clutching a bundle of bread and dried meat. She wouldn't meet his eyes when she whispered, "They'll never accept me here. I should go before trouble follows." He had stopped her with a single word, "Stay." It came out rough, but the tremor in his voice betrayed more than command. He couldn't watch her vanish into the wilderness, swallowed by wolves or men crueler than the ones who had locked her in that barn. That night, as rain threatened again, riders approached, 3 men from town, lanterns swaying. Their boots stomped mud on the porch. A fist struck the door. "Carver! We heard you've got something that ain't yours." Jonah rose, revolver holstered but hand resting near it. Clara stood frozen, clutching the quilt around her shoulders. He glanced at her once, a look that said both trust me and forgive me. Then he opened the door. The men sneered. "That girl, she don't belong here. Best you hand her back before folks start thinking you've lost your wits." Jonah's jaw tightened. His silence stretched long enough for thunder to growl overhead. Then he said, each word steady as stone, "She belongs where she's safe, and that's here." The tallest rider spat in the mud. "You'll ruin your name for her." Jonah's reply was sharp, final. "Then let it be ruined." The men shifted, eyes narrowing, but something in Jonah's stance, grief turned to fire, made them step back. Their lanterns bobbed away into the storm. Inside, Clara trembled. Why would you do that? Why risk everything? Jonah met her gaze, the truth breaking loose at last. Because I've already lost everything once. I won't lose you too. The words hung between them like lightning before it strikes. Brilliant, dangerous, impossible to ignore. But in the Wild West, such declarations were sparks. And sparks always set fires. The fire came quickly, though not from flames. By morning, the valley buzzed with gossip. At the mercantile, women whispered over flour sacks. In the saloon, men spat tobacco and muttered Jonah Carver's name like it was a curse. Clara Mae walked through town once to fetch sewing thread, but the stares cut deeper than knives. She returned pale, hands shaking, and whispered, "I can't stay. I'll only bring you ruin." Jonah wouldn't hear it. Ruin's just words from men who never bled for nothing. Let them talk. Yet at night, when she lay curled beneath the quilt, he sat at the table staring into the dark, wondering how long he could shield her from a world that judged before it knew. Then came the raid. Outlaws swept down from the ridge, driving cattle into chaos, shots cracking across the pasture. Jonah leapt to the saddle, rifle in hand, determined to push them back. Clara, hearing the commotion, ran barefoot through the mud to his side, shouting warnings he couldn't hear above the thunder of hooves. An outlaw lunged from the shadows, revolver raised. Clara screamed. Jonah turned just in time. The bullet grazed his shoulder instead of his heart. He toppled from the horse, blood spilling into the mud. Clara fell to her knees beside him, pressing her hands against the wound, her tears mixing with the rain. "Don't you leave me," she begged, voice breaking. "Not when you've already given me a home." Through the haze of pain, Jonah's eyes found hers. "Then don't leave me either." The words struck harder than any bullet. In that moment, Clara realized she was not just a guest in his cabin. She was the reason his heart still beat. Neighbors arrived with rifles, driving the outlaws back into the hills. By dawn, Jonah was bandaged, pale but breathing. Clara never left his side, wiping the sweat from his brow, whispering prayers she once thought no one listened to. And when the first light broke over the valley, Jonah reached for her trembling hand. "Marry me, Clara, not tomorrow. Not next spring, now, because I'd rather face the whole damn West at your side than live another day without you." Her breath caught. The storm of doubt in her chest cleared, leaving only sunrise. She nodded, tears shining. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." And in that vow whispered over blood and dawn, two broken souls became whole. If Clara Mae's courage and Jonah's vow stirred something in you, don't let their story fade with the sunset. Like this video, subscribe, and ring the bell, because out here in the Wild West, love may be rarer than water, but it always finds a way.